Picture this, a young tree in a forest of ancient oaks. While the old trees stand tall with thick, weathered bark, this young sapling grows with surprising vigour, its roots seeking new paths through the soil. The other trees have seen countless seasons pass, their branches heavy with the weight of time. But the young tree, flexible and full of fresh energy, attracts attention with its unusual growth pattern and bright green leaves. In Africa's political landscape, Captain Ibrahim Traore is much like that young sapling, standing out dramatically among the continent's ageing leaders. At just 37 years old, Captain Ibrahim Traore became the world's youngest president when he took power in Burkina Faso in September 2022. In a continent where the average leader is 63 years old, his youth makes him a remarkable exception. But what makes his story even more fascinating is the bold vision he has for his country, and by extension for Africa. While many leaders across the continent have clung to power for decades, presiding over some of the world's poorest nations, Traoré represents something different, a fresh approach that has captured the imagination of many Africans, especially the youth. But can youth and bold ideas truly transform a nation? Can one young captain succeed where generations of leaders have struggled? What does Traoré's rise tell us about the relationship between leadership, poverty, and development in Africa? And perhaps most importantly, does his approach offer real hope for change, or is it merely another chapter in a familiar story of unfulfilled promises? What has made Traoré stand out is not just his youth, but his approach to governance. Since taking power, he has implemented radical reforms that have resonated with many Burkinabés and Africans across the continent. He reversed salary increases for government officials that had been approved under his predecessor, while maintaining his earnings as a military captain. He has nationalised gold mines and stopped exporting unrefined gold to Europe, instead inaugurating a national gold refinery expected to process 150 tonnes annually. Other achievements include establishing the National Support Centre for artisanal cotton processing, building a new airport, and making considerable agricultural investments. Perhaps most boldly, Traoré has rejected financial assistance from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, insisting that Burkina Faso can develop without loans and their conditionalities from Western institutions. To many Africans, this represents a determination to break free from the influence of these international financial institutions, which have often been criticised for imposing austerity measures that have weakened African economies. But is this approach sustainable? Can such bold reforms truly transform one of the world's poorest countries? And how does Traoré's vision compare to the reality faced by many African nations under long-serving leaders? While Captain Traoré dreams of a self-reliant Burkina Faso, free from external control, his country faces enormous challenges. Burkina Faso is classified among nations with low human development and ranked 185th out of 193 countries on the Human Development Index. Additionally, it placed 149th out of 167 countries on the 2024 SDG Index, which assesses performance across the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. A staggering 64.5% of Burkina Faso's population is multidimensionally poor, with an additional 15.8% classified as vulnerable to multidimensional poverty. Burkina Faso's struggles mirror those of many African nations. Across the continent, several countries face even greater poverty. At the top of our list is South Sudan, with a GDP per capita of just $960.24. That means the average person lives on less than $3 a day. Can you imagine trying to buy food, clothes, medicine, and school supplies with so little money? South Sudan became an independent country in 2011, making it Africa's youngest nation. But instead of celebrating its birthday with economic growth, it has faced civil war, violence, and instability. The country depends heavily on oil, but when oil prices drop, the entire economy suffers. For children in South Sudan, life can be very difficult. Many cannot go to school because their families need them to work or because schools have been destroyed in the fighting. Without education, it becomes harder to break the cycle of poverty. Next on our list is Burundi, with a GDP per capita of $1,010. Burundi is a small country where most people are farmers. They grow crops like coffee, tea, and bananas. The problem is that many farmers in Burundi use the same methods their great-grandparents used. Without modern farming equipment or techniques, they can only grow enough food to feed their families, with little left over to sell. This means they stay poor, and the country cannot develop industries that might create more jobs and wealth. The Central African Republic has a GDP per capita of $1,310. This landlocked country has been caught in a cycle of violence and political upheaval for many years. Imagine trying to open a store or go to school when fighting could break out at any moment. This is the reality for many people in the Central African Republic. Because of the instability, few companies want to invest there, and it's hard for local businesses to grow. Without peace, prosperity remains out of reach. Malawi is known as the warm heart of Africa because its people are so friendly and welcoming. But with a GDP per capita of $1,760, its economy tells a cooler story. Most Malawians are farmers who depend on good weather to grow their crops. But with climate change bringing more droughts and floods, farming has become increasingly difficult. The country also has few factories or industries that could provide different types of jobs. Mozambique has a GDP per capita of $1,790. This coastal country has beautiful beaches that could attract tourists, and it has recently discovered large reserves of natural gas. So why is it still so poor? The answer lies partly in its history of civil war and natural disasters like cyclones and floods. These have destroyed infrastructure and scared away investors. Also, the benefits from natural resources often go to a small number of people, instead of being shared across the whole population. Are you starting to see a pattern? Many of these countries face similar challenges: conflict, dependence on agriculture or natural resources, climate problems, and difficulty attracting investment. But there's another factor we haven't explored yet: leadership. This brings us to a crucial question. Is poverty in Africa primarily a result of poor governance and leadership? And if so, what role do Africa's long-serving leaders play in perpetuating these conditions? While Captain Traoré represents youth and promised change, many African countries have been led by the same individuals for decades. Teodoro Obiang Nguema, Mumbasogo of Equatorial Guinea, holds the record as the world's longest-serving president, having ruled for 45 years since August 1979, when he deposed his uncle in a military coup. Under Obiang's rule, Equatorial Guinea has discovered significant oil reserves, making it one of the wealthiest countries in Africa in terms of GDP per capita. However, this wealth has not translated into development for the majority of citizens. Instead, the country continues to suffer from extreme inequality, with wealth concentrated among the ruling elite, while most citizens live in poverty. Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of Congo has ruled for a total of 40 years, though not consecutively. His first term lasted from 1979 to 1992, and he returned to power in 1997 following a civil war. The Republic of Congo is a major oil producer, but like many resource-rich countries, the benefits of this wealth have not reached the majority of citizens. Corruption, mismanagement, and political repression have been hallmarks of Sassou Nguesso's long rule. Yoweri Museveni has governed Uganda for 38 years, since January 1986. Initially hailed as a reformer who brought stability after years of conflict, Museveni's extended stay in power has been increasingly marked by authoritarianism. Critics accuse him of manipulating elections, suppressing opposition, and amending the constitution to extend his rule. Uganda has seen economic growth under Museveni, but inequality remains high, and youth unemployment is a significant challenge. King Mswati III of Eswatini has ruled for 38 years as well, ascending to the throne in 1986 at the age of 18. As Africa's last absolute monarch, Mswati's rule has been characterised by lavish spending on palaces and luxury cars, while nearly 60% of his subjects live on less than $1.90 a day. Recent years have seen growing protests against his autocratic rule, Isaias Afwerki has led Eritrea for 31 years since its independence from Ethiopia in 1993. His rule is notable for its repression, with no national elections ever held and limited freedoms for citizens. Eritrea has one of the highest rates of military conscription globally, with mandatory service that can last indefinitely. This has led to mass exodus, with many Eritreans risking their lives to flee the country. King Letsi III of Lesotho has been in power for 28 years. He became monarch in October 1997, following the death of his father, Moshoeshoe II. As a constitutional monarch, his role is largely ceremonial, but he remains one of the longest-serving rulers in Africa. Ismail Omar Guelleh of Djibouti has ruled for 25 years. Ismail has been president of Djibouti since 1999. He succeeded his uncle, Hassan Guled Abtidon, who had ruled since the country's independence. Guelleh has faced allegations of extending his presidency through questionable means and electoral practices. King Mohammed VI of Morocco has been there for 25 years. He began his reign on July 23, 1999, following the death of his father, King Hassan II. As one of the most influential Muslim leaders globally, Mohammed VI's reign has focused on modernization efforts and economic reforms, though it has also faced criticisms. Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who has been the head of state for 24 years, completes the list of Africa's 10 longest-serving leaders. Paul Kagame has been the president of Rwanda since April 2000. Kagame, who had been the de facto leader since 1994, took office officially following the resignation of then-President Bizimungu. His administration is credited with economic growth and development, though it faces scrutiny over political freedoms and human rights. These extended periods in power often coincide with constitutional amendments, weakened institutions, and suppression of political opposition. While some long-serving leaders like Rwanda's Kagame have presided over significant economic growth and development, many others have overseen stagnation or decline. The correlation between long tenures and poor governance raises important questions about the impact of leadership on development outcomes. What would these leaders think of Traoré's bold vision? And how does his approach to governance compare to their decades-long rules? The stories of Ibrahim Traore, Africa's poorest nations, and its longest-serving leaders converge around a fundamental question. What is the relationship between leadership, poverty, and development in Africa? The evidence suggests that leadership matters enormously. Countries with similar resource endowments and historical backgrounds have achieved dramatically different development outcomes based on the quality of their governance. Botswana, for instance, was one of the world's poorest countries at independence in 1966, but has since become an upper-middle-income nation with relatively strong institutions and governance. This transformation occurred under a series of democratically elected leaders who prioritised sound economic management and inclusive development. Conversely, countries like Zimbabwe have experienced economic collapse despite substantial natural resources and initial advantages, largely due to poor governance and mismanagement under Robert Mugabe's 37-year rule. The Democratic Republic of Congo, despite its vast mineral wealth, has remained one of the world's poorest nations through decades of misrule, first under Mobutu Sese Seko and then under Laurent and Joseph Kabila. Long-serving leaders often contribute to developmental challenges in several ways. First, they tend to concentrate power in ways that weaken institutions and checks and balances. When a leader can change the constitution at will, override judicial decisions, or silence critics, the foundations for sustainable development are undermined. Second, extended stays in power often lead to corruption and patronage networks that divert resources away from development priorities. When a leader's primary goal becomes maintaining power rather than serving citizens, public resources are allocated based on political loyalty rather than development needs. This creates inefficiencies and inequalities that harm overall economic performance. Third, long-serving leaders often become increasingly disconnected from the realities faced by their citizens, particularly the youth. In a continent where about 60% of the population is under 25 years old, elderly leaders who have been in power for decades may struggle to understand or address the aspirations and challenges of young people. This generational disconnect can lead to policies that fail to address pressing issues like youth unemployment, technological change, and environmental sustainability. However, simply being young or new to power does not guarantee effective leadership. Traoré's case illustrates that charisma and bold rhetoric must be backed by substantive policy accomplishments and measurable improvements in people's lives. His emphasis on natural resource sovereignty and rejection of international financial institutions resonates emotionally with many Africans tired of external intervention. But the practical implementation of these ideas requires careful planning and effective governance structures. The tendency in Africa to place hope in individual leaders, whether young revolutionaries like Traoré or established figures like Rwanda's Kagame who show development results, rather than in strong institutions, remains problematic. Personality-based leadership is inherently unstable and unpredictable, regardless of the leader's initial intentions. The true challenge is building systems that can deliver development regardless of who is in power. As we consider the intertwined stories of Ibrahim Traore, Africa's poorest nations, and its longest-serving leaders, several key lessons emerge for the continent's development path. First, while charismatic leadership can catalyse change, countries need effective civil services, independent judiciaries, accountable parliaments, free media, and vibrant civil societies. These institutions provide the checks and balances that prevent power concentration and ensure that leaders serve the public interest rather than personal. Second, managing natural resources effectively is crucial for many African countries to escape poverty. This requires transparent governance frameworks, prudent fiscal management, and strategies to diversify economies beyond resource extraction. Resource wealth should be invested in human capital, infrastructure, and economic diversification to create sustainable prosperity rather than enriching elites or fueling conflict. Third, inclusive governance that responds to the needs and aspirations of young populations is increasingly important in Africa. With the continent's youth bulge, policies must prioritise education, skills development, job creation, and meaningful political participation for young people. Leaders who fail to address youth priorities risk social instability and missed opportunities for harnessing demographic dividends. Fourth, regional integration and cooperation offer pathways to overcome some of the challenges facing individual countries. By working together through mechanisms like the African Continental Free Trade Area, African nations can build larger markets, strengthen their collective bargaining power in global forums, and address transnational challenges like violent extremism, climate change, and public health crises. Finally, development partners, both traditional Western donors and emerging partners like China, have important roles to play in supporting Africa's development journey. However, this support must respect African agency and ownership, rather than imposing external models or priorities. The most effective partnerships will be those that strengthen local institutions and capacities, rather than creating dependencies or bypassing accountable governance systems. As for Ibrahim Traore himself, his leadership journey is still in its early stages. Will he use his popularity and youth to implement genuine reforms that strengthen Burkina Faso's institutions and improve the lives of its citizens? Or will he follow the path of so many before him, gradually transforming from a revolutionary promising change to an entrenched leader resistant to ceding power? Will his bold vision of resource sovereignty and self-reliance translate into practical policies that generate inclusive growth, or will it remain primarily rhetorical? And perhaps most crucially, will he eventually oversee a return to constitutional rule, or will he join the ranks of Africa's long-serving military leaders? The answers to these questions will determine whether Traoré becomes a genuine agent of transformation or simply the newest face of an old pattern. But more importantly, they will impact the lives and futures of millions of Burkinabés who, like citizens across Africa's poorest nations, deserve leadership that delivers tangible improvements in their daily struggles. This isn't just a story about Traoré and longest-serving African leaders. It's about all of us, about remembering who we are, protecting African unity and solidarity, and rebuilding what was broken during colonialism. And if you felt anything watching this, pride, curiosity, maybe even a little fire in your chest, then don't let that feeling disappear. Subscribe to The New Tourist right now, because this isn't the last story like this we're telling, not by a long shot. Like this video, so the algorithms don't bury a story the world needs to hear. Share it with your family, your friends, and your group chats. Be the reason someone else learns the truth. And if you want to go even deeper, if you want behind-the-scenes stories, early access, exclusive discussions, join our membership community. Because this isn't just a channel anymore, it's a movement. And the story we're writing together, it's only just beginning.